Okay. So before we get to, I'm still in the thing. So what does that mean, socialism, to be honest?
Socialism, it sounds, almost like such a wonderful word, like social. Who doesn't want to be social, right? You go dancing, you're being social. You sit down with friends, you're being social. But no, the definition, which of course I'm not making up, this is from Webster's dictionary or probably other major English dictionaries as well. The definition of socialism is government ownership of all property. But how does government come to be ownership of anything? Government is just usually either it's never really only one person, even if there's one supreme leader. It's a small group of people that are claiming the right to ownership, or which really is control of property that they didn't create and they didn't buy. So it's theft. Okay, we have a word for that, theft. So socialism is government ownership of all property. And that's by essence and by definition, that's coercive trade. It's not non-coercive trade. So socialism is the most anti-social ideology that exists, that's possible.
Yeah. Okay, so it's very important to mention just the definition of it. The specific definition is that it doesn't mean all means of all properties.
Yes, it does. It means all property, everything. It means government owns everything.
I'm looking at the definition right now. Sorry. It means a political and economic theory of social integration who advocates that the means of production, distribution, and exchange should be owned. That's right, owned or regulated. It means they could be regulated. They don't have to be owned.
Yeah, but that's pretty much the same thing, because if you regulate something, that's de facto ownership, right? If you have a house and that house is under your name as if you own it, but I get to tell you how many people you can have in your house, what times you're allowed to turn the air condition on, who you can sell your house to, if you're even allowed to sell your house, it's whatever you want to invent. Do you really own the house? No.
No, just I own it just as much as they allow me to.
Exactly.
That's exactly what it means. I own it, but I'm not being allowed to do everything I want with it, which technically means that I do not really
you don't really own it.
I don't really 100% own it.
Yeah,
I own what they allow me to own. Like if I want to put a nice flower in the garden, that's cool. Or bring a pet, it's fine. But if there's suddenly a curfew,
or maybe even the government says you're not allowed to have a cat. You're not allowed to have a dog. You're not because it bothers the neighbor or something, it's because the government says. So, and now as far as, let's say, means of production, I don't have the Webster's dictionary in front of me now, but okay, a few different dictionaries might have few different variations, but basically everything is either a product of or itself a means of production, right? If you say an apple, well, okay, maybe an apple is not the means of production itself, although you could say it is, right? For you to produce something, you need to eat. So an apple is in that sense, it is a means of production. But even if you just say the land used to grow the apple, okay, then if the government owns all of the land and they decide what to do with the land, then they can say, okay, there's not going to be any apples because we own the land and we're not going to allow anybody to grow apples. Only bananas, or only onions, or only whatever. So even by that definition that you gave me, it is a de facto ownership of everything, including all of the humans, because what is a human itself if not the means of producing something, right? You have a brain, you have hands. If you are a woman, then you have the means of production of human life. So So yeah, means of production means ownership of everything, de facto.
Yeah, I understand. Okay, it's interesting.
Hmm.
And so which brings us to a different thing. So we said socialism is the ownership of the government on the or regulation of the things, which actually makes it not yours, makes it de facto the government's.
Yeah, and if we go to,
yeah,
can I give an example? There were two socialists.
Give one, but go ahead.
Okay, I'll give two real life examples in relatively modern history. There was Nazi Germany and there was Soviet Russia. Now, supposedly, these were two very different countries, right? One was supposedly communist and one was supposedly socialist, but it's really the same ideology. Socialism is the same as communism. Now, in Soviet Russia, the government outright owned the property. In Nazi Germany, much of the property was on paper, on private hands, but the government told the owners of the property everything what they could do, right? If you owned a factory in Nazi Germany, then the government told you what you could produce, how much you could produce, what you could sell it for, who you were allowed to hire, what you were allowed to pay them. In other words, they controlled, they regulated everything. So were you really the owner of the factory? No, only on paper, but you weren't really. So it was two different approaches to the same ideology, which is socialism.
So communism is just more plain.
Communism is, if you look under the definition of communism, it means collective ownership. But what is a collective? A collective doesn't really exist. We talked about that. We talked about that in not only in Austrianism, but in philosophy in general, in the metaphysics. What does exist? I exist, you exist, but we as a unit, no, we're two individuals. We're not one entity. A collective doesn't exist. So there's no such thing as collective ownership because a collective doesn't exist. So what it de facto means, it comes back to government ownership, whether you call it a government or a junta or any kind of supposed group ownership. So yeah, socialism and communism, they're synonyms.
Yeah, they are synonyms, but not complete synonyms.
Complete synonyms.
You know
Complete. There's no difference.
There's no such. By the way, there's no include. Like I took a degree in English. There's no such thing as a complete synonym.
Well,
no word is completely dissimilar as the other one. But I would say yes. What the technically, like according to what you're saying, what the alleged communist philosophy basically is socialism. It leads to the same stuff.
It leads to exactly the same stuff. Anyone that says that he supports socialism but opposes communism is nonsensical. It's like saying that I oppose murder, but I support the poisoning and assassination. But even that, you can find differences. But between socialism and communism, no, it's impossible to say. It's impossible to logically say that one supports one but opposes the other. It's nonsensical.
I wouldn't say they don't oppose the other, but I'd say if someone says I support socialism but don't support communism, I'd say you basically support what communism leads to.
Well, it's not what they both lead to the same thing. I mean, even the Soviet Union, what is the full name of the Soviet Union? USSR, Union of Soviet Socialist or Socialist Soviet, Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, right? USSR. So
which leads, okay. So I understand what you're saying. I understand what you're saying. Okay. Yeah. What do you think about like if